The Harvard auditorium was buzzing with anticipation. The invitation-only event, titled The Future of Leadership and Innovation, had drawn some of the most influential minds in academia and politics. The audience, comprised of professors, students, and select members of the press, sat in eager silence as the evening's guest panelists took their seats. At the center of it all was Dr. Richard Callaway, a renowned Harvard professor known for his sharp wit and unfiltered opinions. His specialty? Political philosophy and leadership studies. He had written countless books on why leaders should be intellectual elites rather than media figures or legacy personalities. A not-so-subtle jab at those born into influential families. And tonight, seated just across from him, was Barron Trump. The youngest son of President Donald Trump had always been a mystery to the public. Unlike his father, Barron had kept a low profile, avoiding controversy, staying away from the political spotlight. At only 18, he had yet to make a major public statement about his beliefs, ambitions, or even how he viewed the legacy of his father. Until tonight. The debate, originally planned to be a civil discussion on leadership styles, was about to take a turn no one expected. Dr. Callaway leaned forward in his chair, adjusting his glasses as he eyed Barron with a condescending smirk. The professor had already spent the last 20 minutes lecturing about how intellect and experience, not lineage, define true leadership. Now he was ready to make his next move. "Tell me, Mr. Trump," Callaway said, his tone dripping with amusement. "Since you're here representing the next generation of leadership, I have to ask, what exactly qualifies you to speak on the subject?" The audience chuckled softly. Barron sat relaxed in his chair, dressed sharply in a tailored navy blue suit. His 6 feet 7 inches frame made him an imposing figure, but his expression remained calm. He took a moment before answering, his gaze steady. "I believe the invitation itself qualifies me, Professor." The room went silent. Dr. Callaway cleared his throat, momentarily caught off guard. He wasn't expecting Barron to fire back so quickly. "Fair enough," the professor said, leaning back. "But let's be honest, if your last name wasn't Trump, would anyone really care about what you had to say?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. The question was direct, even cruel. Callaway wasn't just questioning Barron's intelligence. He was questioning his right to be there. A few students in the audience smirked. Some of them were waiting for Barron to fail. Barron smiled slightly unfazed. "That's an interesting question, Professor. But let me ask you this. If your name wasn't Callaway, would anyone still read your books?" The murmurs grew louder. A few gasps escaped from the crowd. Even some of the professors on the panel raised their eyebrows. Dr. Callaway's expression darkened. Barron wasn't just playing defense. He had turned the question back on the professor himself. The moderator, a well-known journalist, interjected, attempting to redirect the tension. "Let's keep things focused on leadership." But Dr. Callaway wasn't about to let the moment slip away. He adjusted his mic and forced a laugh. "All right, let's put it another way," he said. "You're young, Mr. Trump. What could someone your age possibly understand about leadership? You've never led a company, a government, or even a major organization. So tell me, how do you define leadership?" Barron tapped his fingers on the table thoughtfully before answering. "Leadership isn't about age, Professor. It's about vision." Callaway's smirk returned. "Vision? That's vague. Care to elaborate?" Barron leaned forward slightly, his voice steady. "Leadership is about the ability to inspire, to take responsibility, to make decisions when no one else will, and to be willing to take the hits when things go wrong." The audience listened in silence. "You know who taught me that?" Barron continued. "My father. And whether you love him or hate him, you can't deny he understands leadership." Callaway scoffed. "Ah, yes, Donald Trump, the man who, let's be honest, is not exactly known for his intellectual depth." The audience laughed nervously. Some of them expected Barron to back down or fumble his response. Instead, Barron smiled. "I'd argue that intelligence takes many forms. You can be the smartest professor in the world, but if you can't connect with people, you'll never lead them." The mood shifted. Even those who weren't Trump supporters had to admit, Barron had a point. Dr. Callaway leaned forward again, his smile gone. He wasn't used to being challenged like this, especially not by an 18-year-old. Fine, then answer this. What do you believe makes a leader unfit? Barron met his gaze. Arrogance. The professor's eyes flashed with irritation. The audience burst into laughter. Barron let the moment settle before continuing. A leader who believes they're the smartest person in the room? That's dangerous. A leader should be willing to listen, to learn, to adapt. The moment you believe you already have all the answers, you stop leading. Dr. Calloway opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, the moderator interrupted. We need to take a quick break. The event staff stood up, signaling a brief intermission. But as the panelists left the stage, the murmurs in the audience only grew louder. The murmurs in the Harvard auditorium grew louder as the intermission ended. Students, journalists, and faculty members whispered among themselves, some amused, some shocked, and others visibly annoyed. No one had expected Barron Trump, an 18-year-old who had largely stayed out of the public eye, to hold his ground against Dr. Richard Calloway, one of Harvard's most respected professors. But he had done more than hold his ground. He had flipped the conversation on its head. As the panelists returned to their seats, Dr. Calloway's demeanor had changed. Gone was the smug confidence from earlier in the debate. Now there was a flicker of irritation in his expression. Barron, on the other hand, remained calm, collected, and unfazed. The moderator cleared his throat, addressing the audience. We're back, and I think we can all agree that this has been a fascinating discussion. Let's continue. Dr. Calloway leaned forward, his hands clasped together. He wasn't done with Barron. Not yet. Let's talk about decision-making, he said, his tone measured. Since you say leadership is about vision and responsibility, let's apply that to real-world scenarios. Barron nodded. Go ahead. The professor smirked slightly. If you were in charge of this country today, what is the first thing you'd change? The audience fell silent, waiting for Barron to stumble. This was a trap question. A wrong answer could make him look naive or unqualified. But Barron didn't hesitate. I'd remove every bureaucratic regulation that strangles small businesses and entrepreneurs. The room shifted uncomfortably. Some students nodded, while others rolled their eyes. Calloway arched an eyebrow. That's a very simplistic answer. Barron shrugged. It's a simple problem. Too much red tape kills innovation. The professor chuckled, shaking his head. I don't think you understand how complicated governing actually is, Mr. Trump. Do you really believe leadership is as simple as waving away problems with a few executive orders? Barron smiled slightly. I never said leadership was simple. I said problems are often overcomplicated by the people in charge. The audience buzzed with whispers. Even those who didn't support him had to admit he had a point. Dr. Calloway's jaw tightened. You come from wealth and privilege. Do you really believe you understand the struggles of everyday Americans? Barron leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable. Then in a voice calm yet firm, he answered, You assume wealth means I don't understand struggle. That's your first mistake. Calloway scoffed. Oh? Enlighten me. Barron met his gaze head-on. Struggle isn't just about money. It's about responsibility. And I've had that since the day I was born. A hush fell over the audience. Most people my age worry about what college they'll attend. I grew up knowing that every word I spoke, every move I made would be scrutinized. I didn't get the luxury of making mistakes privately. Calloway opened his mouth, but Barron wasn't finished. You talk about privilege, Professor. But let me ask you, how many doors opened for you because of your name? Because of your connections? How many times did you walk into a room and already have the respect of your peers simply because of the institution you represent? The professor's face hardened. I earned my place, he said through clenched teeth. Barron nodded. And so have I. Silence. Even the moderator looked stunned. The Harvard professor had no response. The panel discussion wrapped up soon after, but the conversation had already spread far beyond the auditorium. By the time Barron Trump stepped off the stage, Twitter and news headlines were already exploding. Barron Trump humiliates Harvard professor. Watch the shocking moment. Harvard professor tries to insult Barron Trump. It backfires spectacularly. Trump's youngest son just proved he's a force to be reckoned with. Clips of the exchange went viral within hours. Even people who disagreed with his politics had to admit, Barron had handled himself exceptionally well. Some news anchors tried to spin it, claiming Dr. Calloway had been set up or ambushed, but the raw footage didn't lie. Barron had remained composed, confident, and sharp, while the professor had become visibly irritated. And just like that, Barron Trump was no longer just the quiet son of Donald Trump. He was something else, something the media wasn't prepared for. Later that evening, after the event had ended, a young Harvard student approached Barron as he was leaving the building. She looked hesitant but determined. "Mr. Trump?" she said. Barron turned. "Yeah?" She swallowed. I just wanted to say that I came here tonight expecting you to be exactly how the media portrays you." Barron raised an eyebrow. "And?" She exhaled. "And I was wrong. You're way smarter than people give you credit for." Barron smiled. "You know, you could just say you judged me before you met me." The girl laughed nervously. "I guess I did." She hesitated, then asked, "So are you planning on running for office someday?" Barron paused, considering his answer. Then, with a knowing smirk, he simply said, "We'll see." Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that inspire and challenge us to grow. What would you have done if you were in his shoes? Let us know in the comments below.